بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وبعد. Inshallah, we ended Kahf yesterday, so we spoke about Kahf and started Maryam and TaHa, and then we got into Anbiya. So Surah Maryam again brings us to the question of the proper way of making dua, and whether the guarantees of being have a positive response for your dua. So the surah, that's one of the major themes of Surah Maryam. We have the story of Zakaria, Sayyidina Zakaria alayhi salam, and how he asked God for a child, a son. But his dua was sort of inspired by what he saw, the sign of God that he saw in the case of Maryam. Even though Maryam is under his spiritual care, but sometimes God reminds us through people around us, and through things around us. So when Sayyidina Zakaria, he was mentoring Maryam, as we learn in Surah Al Imran and Maryam, he will check on her. She has in her private space in the mosque, masjid. And كلما دخل عليها زكريا المحراب وجد عندها رزقا. Whenever Sayyidina Zakaria come to visit, to check or bring her food for that matter, he will find her with food, with provision. And since he is the mentor, he is the guide, the spiritual teacher, it was his right to ask her, where do you get this from? So قال يا مريم أنى لك هذا? Maryam, where does this come from? As you know, food is one of the most important things in your spiritual development. If your food is not clean, in the sense that it's not and halal, then you forget it. You will not spiritually grow. No, if you don't eat halal. So that's one of the major requirements. Those are just prerequisites for the actual spiritual development and growth. So that's why he was very particular about that. Where do you get the food from? أنى لك هذا? And she responded, قالت هو من عند الله. إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب. It is from Allah's presence, because Allah can provide for whom He pleases without calculation, without asbab. Allah gives us through means and sometimes without means. So we call that miracles. When something happened without a visible cause, without a visible means, it's called a miracle. But things that happen usually through cause and means, we don't consider them as miracles. But they are both, it's Allah's choice whether He wants to give you something without means or give you something through means. So at this point, God was providing her food without means. She wasn't doing anything to make food come to her. It just comes. وَمِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْزُقُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. So Sayyidina Zakaria, that triggered a thought process, because at this point he has given hope of having children because of his age and the wife's age as well, at which age normally people don't have children. But once he said that بغير hisab, that brought hope. Even though by natural means I cannot have a child, but God can give me a child بغير hisab. So that was the inspiration. هنالك دعا زكريا ربه. Thereupon, Zechariah called his Lord. رب هب لي من لدنك ذرية طيبة. Allah grant me righteous. So that is Surah Al-Imran. Then we have the how he put the dua. That's what is mentioned in Maryam. كافها يا عين صاد. This is, as we said, حروف المقطعة. These are rumuzun. They are codes. The meaning of which is between God and the messengers. It's like an agreed code between them. He says it and they understand it. So anyway, ذكر رحمة ربك عبده زكريا إذ نادى ربه نداء خفيا. So that's the first thing. So dua has two aspects. One, the manner of making the dua is important. The actual content of the dua, al-kayfiyya wal-madmoon, as they call it. So the content of the dua and the way you make the dua. So those two have, when they match, if you fulfill those requirements, then the dua is answered instantly. So this Zakariya's dua contain all these four requirements. Two has to do with the way of putting the dua, and two has to do with the content of the dua. So the two that has to do with the way you make your dua, one is nida'an khafiyya, so al-khufya. Your dua should be done in a tone of voice that is not loud. So don't raise your voice when you make dua, knowing that God is close to you. God is close to you, He can hear and see. So you don't need to raise your voice. إنني معكما أسمع وأرى. So that is one important point. The other one is your dua you have to express that you truly need what you're asking for. التضرع. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه. Who responds to the one who is needy when you call him. So that ittirar must be expressed in your dua, an extreme sense of need and urgency. So those are the two first things. So Sayyidina Zakaria fulfilled those two in his dua. First he said, إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ نِدَاءً خَفِيًّا, when you call his Lord in a voice that is humble and gentle and low. قال رب إني وهن العظم مني واستعاضت الشيبة ولم أكن بدعائك ربي شقي. So وهن العظم مني. So now he's expressing why he's needy. الوهن وهن العظم مني. My bones are fragile. I'm old now. I cannot do much. I can physically speaking. وهن العظم مني, and so my bones are weak. I'm all gray. فهب. Therefore, so those are the two, الضراعة والخفية. ادعوا ربكم تضرعا وخفية إنه لا يحب المعتدين. So that's the kayfiyya, the way, the manner of putting your supplication. The two that has to do with the content of the dua, the madmoon, is one is your dua must express both al-khawf wa raja. Must have hope and fear, both. It should not only have hope or only have fear, but it must be a mixture of both. Al-khawf wa raja, which comes to ihsan, as you know. So then he said, وإني خفت الموالي من ورائي وكانت امرأتي آخرة. I am afraid about the heirs, the people after me who will take care of my affairs. وَكَانَتْ امْرَأَتِي آخِرَةً, and my wife is barren, cannot bear children. So this is the fear aspect. I'm afraid about my legacy, my inheritance, my heritage. So the hope comes after that. فَهَبْ لِي مِن لَدُنْكَ وَلِيًّا يَرِثُنِي وَيَرِثُ مِنْ آلِ يَعْقُوبَ وَاجْعَلْهُ رَبِّي رَضِيًّا. So give me, habli, meaning give me from your unprescribed mercy. Not the written one, because the written one is written that he's not going to have a child. But beyond the written rahmah, there is infinite rahmah. That's not written. So give me habli. So hab, min ladunka. Min ladunka. So from your own self, from your own presence. So that one is not restricted. You can ask Allah from al-mawahibul ladunniya, gifts from His own presence. Wali, and that's not written in your book or anything like that. Then, Ya Zakaria, the answer came right away, Inna nubashiruka bi ghulamin ismuhu Yahya. So this is how, when you're making a dua at any point, keep this in mind. These 4 points. Al-khufya, al-dara'a, al-khawfu, wal-raja'. So your dua must contain those 4. Anyway, so that is the introduction on Surah to Maryam. And then, of course, the story of Sayyidina Yahya, and then the story of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. And then the surah continues on that note. Then we go into Surah to TaHa, which is mainly a story of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, and the story of Adam. And I think I discussed that a few days ago, that Adam and Musa are always side by side. They always follow each other in the Quran, even though there is a huge space in time between them. But simply because the history begins with Adam, and there is a big shift in human history from Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. It's as though a new beginning. Allah said, وَلَقَدْ آتِينَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا أَهْلَكْنَا الْقُرُونَ الْأُولَى. We gave Musa the book after destroying the ancient nations. So as though Musa's time begins a new era in human history that ushered in our modern civilization, so to speak. Anyway, so the story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, which is we can go into all the details of that, but the major theme of the surah is about happiness and misery. What are the causes of happiness, and what are the causes that brings you to misery? And so the surah, that's the main theme of the surah. And then, of course, it offers those 2 people, Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina Adam, who Allah granted, who has achieved happiness, and Iblis and Samiri, those 2 who also have ended up in misery. And also, of course, he talks about the story of Adam and the hardship and the warning God gave him, that about what if he does will plunge him into misery. And so when God put him in his garden, قال إن لك ألا تجوع فيها ولا تعرى وأنك لا تظمأ فيها ولا تضحى. In this garden, you will not be without clothing, without food, without water, without drink, without shelter. So God sort of guaranteed. He said, don't worry. I've taken care of all your needs. So all now you have to do is just worship me. I made everything for you, and I made you for me. So keep yourself busy with what you are made for and not what has been made for you. So everything is made for you. Don't worry about that. It's done. That's for you. Now what you need to do is to focus on that for which you have been created, and that is to seek the pleasure of God and to get closer to God, which is the source of happiness for you. So those are the story of Sayyidina Adam and Sayyidina Musa at the beginning, and the story of Sayyidina, and the story of Samiri who have a misconception, some wrong ideas about God, and that put him into trouble. And also Iblis is the same thing, a wrong tawhid, that also put him also into trouble. So those are the two major stories in Surah TaHa. And inshallah, on a note, since today is at this moment is what we call lunar eclipse, al-khusuf wal-kusuf. So there is the hadith in Bukhari about kusuf, which is solar eclipse taking place at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and for which he gathered people for the prayer of eclipse. Prayer of eclipse is 2 rak'ah, and each rak'ah there is 2 ruku'. That's how you pray it. You stand up, read Surah and Fatiha, you make ruku', and you come up, you read again, and then you go back to ruku' again, then you go to sujood after that. So 2 rak'ah. So 2 rak'ah with 4 sujood and 4 ruku'. But anyway, the khutbah that he made after the eclipse is what is important. In that khutbah, he said that inna ash-shamsa wal qamar ayatani min ayatillah, because that particular eclipse happened on the very day in which his son passed away. So people associated the two. They said the kusuf happened because his son passed away. He said no. That the sun and the moon are signs of God. Eclipse doesn't happen because somebody dies, somebody is born. It is a sign from Allah. When you see it, respond properly. فَصَلُّوا وَكَبِّرُوا وَتَصَدَّقُوا. These are the 3 things. Pray, so salat. Tasaddaqu, give charity. As-sadaqa tutfi ghadab al-Rabb, as you know. The hadith about charity extinguishes the anger of the Lord. So because the main purpose behind these phenomena, eclipse, earthquake, tsunami, all this, is one thing. There's one reason behind it, is the displeasure of God. That's the reason behind it. The hadith about az-zalzala, that either when God wants to warn his servants, he will remove a veil between himself and the earth, any part of the earth, one particular part, and then the earth will, when he sees God's tajalli, it will tremble out of fear of God. Human beings are very oblivious, but the earth and the creation, they know. When God manifests himself, they have fear. So the earth will tremble, but when he really wants to visit his punishment on them, he will remove the veil completely, and that part of the earth will collapse. So the scientific explanation is just as much as human knowledge can go, but this is the actual reason behind everything that science can't reach. Anyway, so that is the reason. So that means that the actual reason is God's displeasure. And what causes that displeasure is the human beings doing corruption. So our actions on the earth impact the rest of the universe. So we are not independent entities that our actions only is limited to us. No, your action affect the environment around you and the larger universe of which you are a part of. So he said, then after he said that sallu kabbiru wa tasadda, he said that inna Allah la aghyaru ay yazni abdu aw tazni amatuhu. So he ended that. Allah is not happy that his male servant commits adultery or his female servant. So meaning that the adultery is one of the causes of one of the many phenomena of corruption in the human societies that can trigger off these kind of problems and bring disorder and chaos into our universe that will, of course, eventually impact us back. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لنفسي ولكم.